These are a few of the other camps that you see throughout Port-au-Prince. They vary in sizes, and I have some figures for you in a moment. So the number of camps now is 1,000, and that's a decline from about 1,500 following the earthquake. And you see the population figures for the camps. It's down now to about 630,000, about half, a little less than half of what it was at the height of the post-earthquake period. But there's 1,000 camps there to be looked after, and I got a printout from the census that the International Organization for Migration did in May. And it's all here. It's 10 pages of very tiny print. I need my magnifying glass. I printed it so small so I could have the whole spreadsheet on one page, but it's a lot there. But the thing that I was most interested in looking at through the census what are some of the basic conditions of life there. And if you look at the three categories there of services, water, toilets, and bathing, it's pretty bad, right? Only 25% of the camps have potable water being supplied to them. So people just have to go out, find their water somewhere, somehow. Toilets, only half. What's happening to the other half of people that have to do their biological needs? And bathing. Now, these are a quick approximation that I did. The actual figures may be a little bit higher because the larger camps tend to have more services than the smaller camps. So these percentages I have here are based on the number of camps, 25% of camps. Probably a little more than that in terms of population has, for example, potable water supply. Maybe 35% do. I'm not sure because I didn't look at the figures that closely. But I will tell you that in Camp Jean-Marie Vincent, where I was, which is the largest camp in Port-au-Prince, there are very few bathing facilities. You saw what's happened to the bathing facilities there. And so every camp has its own story. It might have an international organization in there doing good works. There might be medical service there. There might be drinking water. Or they might be living under the threat of cholera if they don't have access to clean drinking water. They might be suffering from serious illnesses that they can't get treated by a doctor. The kids may be running around the camp all day long with no school or other form of daycare to go to. Every camp's going to have its own story. And this big camp that we were in didn't have proper bathing. Most of the children had nothing to do during the daytime. Camp Jean-Marie Vincent, the camp committee told us there are 1,500 children in the camp with no adult supervision. Orphans, basically, just surviving somehow in the camp. So it's tough, it's very difficult, and it's got to change. This is not acceptable 18 months after the earthquake. We went to Leogan, which is the epicenter of the earthquake. This is the camp one of the camps which Venezuela established very shortly, really within days of the earthquake. And it's a well-run camp. It was from the beginning. Venezuela worked very closely with the residents of the camp. They set a really good example in doing this. But it's 18 months later, and even the best-run camp is not a place where you want to live for more than 18 months. And so lots of people have moved out of this camp. They're only under canvas here, as you see. And we met the residents who are still there, and they said, "Where's our shelter? We're living under canvas 18 months later. It's not acceptable." And what we found is the people that have left the camp, they've just sort of gone here and there to do what they had. Some people, yes, did get some temporary shelter, but others moved into the damaged homes that I talked to you about. Or maybe they moved in, maybe they got a friend or a family member that they've doubled up on. Maybe they've been able to get to a different area of Haiti, out of the earthquake zone for a while to survive. Everyone has their own way of dealing, but it's really difficult. And I can tell you that most of the Haitians that we met and talked to feel that this is not acceptable. They don't expect that everyone's going to have a house a year or 2 years, even maybe not even 5 years after the earthquake, but they want to see some direction here, and they're not seeing it with the housing and shelter. And I'll talk about the other services in a moment, which are also problematic. These are the temporary shelters that have been built in various areas of the earthquake zone. I don't have the exact figures. I think it could be 30,000, 40,000 temporary shelters that have been built through the earthquake zone. This slide is from Corail. And temporary is the operative word here. First of all, they're only going to last a couple of years in the tropical weather conditions. But secondly, they're not great places to live. Look at the roof and think of the hot tropical sun. What do you do in a structure like that in the daytime? You can't be in there. It's simply there to sleep in. And there's a real discussion among aid providers in Haiti, Haitian as well as international, about the wisdom or not of even putting resources into temporary shelters because they're not going to last that long and they're not comfortable places to begin with. So why not take a little more time and invest in longer-term housing? That's a serious discussion that's ongoing and has merits to look at. And then this camp has some schooling for children. The blue buildings are schooling, and you can see the World Vision sign there. This is a camp at Corail that World Vision was able to build a temporary shelter. The Canadian Red Cross is building temporary shelter, and lots of other international organizations are assisting Haitians to build temporary shelter. But the numbers are pretty small, and the overwhelming numbers of people that are still affected by the earthquake are the ones that you saw living under scraps of plastic, metal, in all the disparate camps. So it's not a great situation. This is a temporary shelter. They're called T-shelters. That's the language. This is in the countryside. This was on the road between Léogane and Jacmel. We saw actually quite a few T-shelters outside in the countryside, which I thought was pretty good. Obviously, there'd been some good services developed there. But again, this is temporary, so let's not exaggerate what's been accomplished. Now, this is a overhead from Google Earth of really probably the biggest story that we found out while we were in Haiti. And it speaks to the slow pace of providing shelter to Haitians affected by the earthquake, but also it speaks to the pre-existing social and economic crisis in Haiti prior to the earthquake. Because what you're seeing here, and this is an overhead from November 2010, it's the latest Google Earth, you're seeing the expansion of, I'll call them shanty towns. I don't like to, I wish I had a more proper word, but it's new housing, let's call it spontaneous housing that's being built. This is now on the outskirts of Port-au-Prince. This is just north of Quad-Bouquet, what used to be the northern limit of the city. And I'll give you another overhead here. It's a little bit of a bigger overhead, and I'll go back to the previous one. So the red circled areas are the spontaneous settlement that has been created north of the city, and it's much larger than what you see here. This is 8 months ago. And there's probably, I'm guessing, 200,000 people now living in this spontaneous settlement north of that long red line you see. And what happened here was the original Corail settlement, which was intended to get people off the Pétionville golf course because it was very dangerous terrain for the people to be living in temporary camps. They were going to build a new community up there, basically, a very large one. They were talking in terms of 50,000 people. And they were going to, of course, provide services there, but they were also going to encourage investors to come and establish some factories so people could actually work. Because there's no way you can live here and get into Port-au-Prince for a job. The traffic's terrible and it's a long distance. Now, Corail is the two, you see the two green names, Corail Sector 3, Corail Sector 4. That's the original Corail plan. It's basically sitting stalled now because the land here is very inhospitable. The investment to build factories so people could find work has not come. There's been a little bit, but not very much. And basically the whole project's been stalled. It's basically, it appears from most people, discussing this, it was a bad plan. And so there they sit. The official Corail has 7,000 or 8,000 people, and they're living in the temporary shelters that I showed you earlier for the most part. But everything beyond that is the people who got the word that, aha, we might have an area now that's going to get some serious services. Plus, this was empty land before the earthquake. So, aha, we're going to get a piece of land, and hopefully over time the services are going to come into Corail. They're talking about building factories there and so on. So this is, this is a new kind of poor district of the city of Port-au-Prince being born before our very eyes. And the people that we went and toured with there were just astounded by the rapidity of how quickly this has happened and the numbers involved. Because these areas, the two large ones you see there, Jerusalem and Canaan, there's others as well that aren't quite as well marked on the map. There's no services there, there's nothing. The Haitian government has said, and it's instructed international organizations, we are not going to serve this area. It's unplanned, we never decided it, and we don't know what we're going to do, but we're not going to assist these people because anything we do is just going to encourage more of it. And that's really an untenable situation. The reality is people have gone there because whatever it is there, and there's no services, and it's a semi-desert, and it's hot and everything else, it's better than where they came from. And so what you're looking at is the consequence, not just of the earthquake, but also of the pre-existing conditions and how So really, we're talking about the earthquake just kind of piling on top of what was already such a difficult situation in Haiti with jobs, education, healthcare, housing, all these things. And so in a sense, the problems become much bigger. And the reason this is happening is because people don't have any faith that there's an alternative. The government's not saying, you don't have to go there because we have, here's the other plan we have. And we can assure you in 6 months or a year or maybe even 2 years, you're going to be on the road to establishing yourself in a new community. So this is quite distressing for us to see. And there's a little bit of a close-up of we're talking, and again, I tell you, this is 8 months ago. I mean, this is a lot of people that have moved in there, and you get a bit of a sense from the air. I mean, there's nothing there. It's just a piece of land that people have staked out, and they really should under these conditions. If the alternative is worse than this, then they have every right to do that. And believe me, once you drive into this area, as we did, it gets, it's a city being born, basically. I would call it a Cité Soleil being born. It's actually not that far from Cité Soleil. And this is all unofficial activity going on. This is people building their own houses, taking matters into their own hands. And on the road that borders this large area that you saw, this is the commerce in construction materials. These are, individual, businessmen that have created there's a market there to buy construction material. People come out to the big highway and then they go, sometimes quite deep into this new area for the material in the trucks here is what's used to build cinder blocks, which is the basic building block, so to speak, of housing in Haiti. And so again, people are doing this because of the alternative is worse, but they also have an expectation that they're creating a de facto situation where the Haitian government, as well as the world, the international community, will have no choice at some point but to say, okay, yes, we're going to have to start assisting here in water provision, schools, healthcare, all these sorts of things. But it's a big gamble, and it's not at all a good situation. So, I make the point here that you had right after the earthquake, the figures vary, but these are figures from the Building Assessment and Removal Study that close to 900,000 people were displaced by the earthquake. And within a couple of months, about half had returned home, of course, many to the damaged buildings that I talked about. But you've got an awful lot of people that didn't necessarily lose their home from the earthquake who were in the camps. And if they're there, it's not because life in the camps is good. It's because either conditions where they came from are even worse, or there's an expectation that because it's a camp, because the international community there is there supposedly with billions of dollars of aid and assistance, that I'm going to get a better life more quickly this way. And so it's a very complicated and difficult situation for any government to have to deal with. This is another side now of what's happening with the camps. This is a protest meeting of the residents of Camp Django, which is one of the smaller camps in Delma. It's called. Delma is one of the 6 municipalities of Port-au-Prince. And they were being threatened with eviction by the mayor's office of Delma because Delma, the mayor's office doesn't like these ramshackle tent camps on the streets of its city. Delma is next to Pétionville, is sort of the best off area. And so there's been serious confrontations with the mayor's office in Delma, who doesn't want the camps on the streets of the city. And these residents are being threatened with expulsion. And one of the complicating factors in all this, which people like the mayor of Delma are using more and more, is saying, these people in the camps, they didn't really lose their home in the earthquake. They're there for other reasons, so we can expel them and they'll find their way somewhere else. And that's not true. Lots and lots of people in every camp are there because they lost their home, or in some other way their life was seriously disrupted by the earthquake.